I thought I had merely lost an inheritance, but I was actually about to witness my entire family lose everything they believed they owned. My parents used my money to buy my sister a car, then choked me into silence with a single threat. Yet when I confessed to my grandmother in hospice, she did not weep. She simply made one phone call. That single act ensured their celebratory dinner would end in total, devastating silence. My name is Reese Patterson, and at 33 years old, I had long ago accepted my role as the invisible glue that held the Patterson family portrait together. I was the one who remembered birthdays, the one who drove aunties to the airport, and the one who absorbed the anxiety in the room so everyone else could breathe easily. I suppose that was why, when the call came about Grandma Vivian being moved into hospice care, no one asked me how I felt. They simply assumed I would be the one to handle the logistics while they managed the optics. The emergency family meeting took place in the living room of my parents' house, a space that felt more like a museum exhibition than a home. My father, Douglas, sat in his leather armchair, the one my mother jokingly forbade anyone else from touching. He looked the part of the grieving son perfectly, dressed in a crisp, button-down shirt despite the late hour. My mother, Marilyn, was pacing near the window, her phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. And then there was Brielle, my younger sister, curled up on the sofa with the practiced nonchalance of someone who knew the world would always tilt in her favor. The silence in the room was heavy, but it was not heavy with sadness. It was heavy with calculation. "It is a matter of days," Douglas said. Breaking the quiet, he did not look at me. He was looking at his calendar on the coffee table. "Maybe a week. 2 at the most. We need a schedule." "I cannot go tomorrow," Marilyn said immediately, stopping her pacing. "The Neighborhood Association Board is meeting, and if I am not there, Sharon will try to rewrite the bylaws regarding fence heights again. Besides, I need to make sure the house is ready for the dinner next week. The Pikes have high standards." Brielle looked up from her cuticles. "And do not look at me. Landon and I are going to the winery with his parents for 3 days. This is a crucial phase. Mom, Mrs. Pike is finally warming up to me. I cannot just bail on them to sit in a hospital room. It is depressing." Douglas nodded, as if Brielle had just presented a valid legal argument. He turned his gaze to me. "Reese, you take the daily shifts." It was not a question. It was a command, wrapped in a rationalization I had heard 1,000 times before. "Your schedule is flexible," he continued, waving a hand dismissively. "That little job of yours at the Northbridge Youth Arts Program does not have the same demands as a corporate career. You can go in the mornings and stay until the afternoon. Keep us updated." I felt the familiar sting of humiliation prickling at the back of my neck. My job as an administrator and mentor for underprivileged youth was not a little job. It was demanding, exhausting, and vital. But to Douglas Patterson, anything that did not come with a corner office or a 7-figure revenue stream was merely a hobby. "I have a grant proposal due on Thursday," I said, my voice quiet. "And classes run until 6 in the evening." "Make it work, Reese," Marilyn cut in, her tone sharp. This is family. Do not be selfish. Selfish. The word hung in the air. Ironic and bitter. I looked at Brielle, who was already texting again, secure in the knowledge that her pursuit of a wealthy husband was considered a valid career move, while my actual career was an inconvenience. Fine, I said. I will go. I drove to the hospice facility the next morning. The building was nice enough, with manicured lawns and calming pastel walls, but it still smelled of antiseptic and waiting. Walking down the hallway to Grandma Vivian's room, I felt a knot of genuine fear tighten in my stomach. Vivian was the only person in my family who saw me. Not the useful Reese, not the reliable Reese, but just me. When I entered the room, she was awake. She looked impossibly small in the hospital bed. Her silver hair spread out like a halo against the pillow. Her skin was translucent, like parchment paper, but when she turned her head and saw me, her eyes were sharp. They were the same steel-gray eyes that had terrified my father when he was a teenager. "Reese," she whispered. Her voice was thin, but steady. "I knew they would send you first." I pulled the chair close to the bed and took her hand. It felt like holding a dried leaf. "I wanted to come, Grandma." "Liar." She smiled weakly. "You wanted to come, but Douglas ordered you to come. There is a difference." She knew them so well, better than they knew themselves. "How is the program?" she asked. "Did that boy, the one with the charcoal sketches, did he get into the summer intensive?" I blinked, surprised. I had mentioned Marcus and his portfolio to her 3 weeks ago. In passing, my parents could not remember the name of the place I worked, let alone the names of my students, but a dying woman on morphine remembered a teenager she had never met. "He did," I said, feeling tears prick my eyes. "He got a full scholarship." "Good," she nodded. "Talent needs a floor to stand on. Otherwise, it just falls through the cracks." She squeezed my hand, a sudden burst of strength that startled me. "That is why I made sure you have a floor." "Reese." I stiffened. "Grandma, we do not need to talk about that." "We do," she insisted, "because I am running out of breath, and you are too polite for your own good. The inheritance, my personal account, the one I told you about last Christmas," I remembered. She had pulled me aside and told me she had set aside a specific sum, separate from the main estate, solely for me. She had said she wanted me to have freedom, not just money. "It is not a fortune," she wheezed. "Not enough to buy an island, but enough to buy a house, a small one, or start your own studio. Whatever you need so you never have to beg Douglas for a dime." "I know," I said soothingly. "It is okay. You do not need to worry." Her eyes darted to the door, then back to me. The sharpness in her gaze intensified into something that looked like anxiety. "The papers," she said. "The blue binder in my study. The lockbox key. Who has them?" "Mom and Dad went over to your house yesterday," I said. to get your clothes and check on things. I think Dad took the files to his office for safekeeping." Vivian's face changed. The peace vanished, replaced by a rigid tension. She tried to sit up but failed, falling back against the pillows with a frustrated huff. "Douglas has the files? He is your son. Grandma, he is handling the estate. He is a calculator with a heartbeat," she snapped. "And Marilyn is a social climber who uses money as a ladder." She gripped my hand so hard it hurt. "Reese, listen to me. Did you see the binder? Did you see the account specifically listed in your name?" "No," I admitted. "I haven't been to the house." She stared at the ceiling for a long moment, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "Some people," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and resignation, "only respect the truth when it stands in front of them in writing, and sometimes not even then." "Grandma, you are upsetting yourself," I said, alarmed by the color rising in her cheeks. "Dad would not do anything shady. He is obsessed with rules." She looked at me with a pity that chilled me to the bone. "Douglas follows rules he likes. He ignores the ones that inconvenience him. Reese, I need you to promise me something. Do not let them tell you what I wanted. You find out what I wrote." A nurse came in then to check her vitals, signaling that I should step out. I walked out into the corridor with a strange, cold feeling settling in my chest. It wasn't just sadness for her impending death. It was uneasiness. Back at my parents' house that evening, the atmosphere was festive. Too festive. There were fresh flowers in the vase, and a bottle of expensive wine open on the counter. "How is she?" Marilyn asked, barely looking up from a catering menu. "She is sharp," I said. "She was asking about her papers. She seemed worried about the files in her study." The room went still. It was a subtle shift, like the air pressure dropping before a storm. Douglas lowered his newspaper. Marilyn stopped flipping pages. "She is confused," Douglas said. His voice was calm, reasonable, and utterly dismissive. "The medication messes with her memory. We have everything under control. Reese, you do not need to burden yourself with the administrative side. Just hold her hand. That is what you are good at." She seemed very specific. "Dad," I pressed, though my voice wavered. "She asked about a blue binder." Marilyn walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. Her touch was light, but it felt like a boundary being drawn. "Reese, honey," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, "do not make a fuss. Don't make her agitated with questions about money or wills. It is tacky. Let her go in peace." "We are handling it," Douglas added, turning the page of his paper. "Just keep her calm. Do not make her last days stressful." "Don't make her stressful." It sounded like concern, but as I looked at my parents, my father refusing to meet my eyes, my mother smiling that tight, practiced smile, it didn't feel like concern. It felt like an order to keep my mouth shut. It felt like a lock clicking into place. The next morning, the air in the hospice room felt thinner. as if time were evaporating right in front of us. Vivian was weaker, her lucid moments coming in short, precious bursts between long stretches of morphine-induced sleep during one of these brief windows of clarity. She gripped my wrist with surprising force. Her eyes, usually so piercing, were clouded with a frantic need. She asked me to go to her house, the old Victorian on Elm Street that had been gathering dust for 2 months, to retrieve a photo album from the bottom shelf of her study and a small wooden box of keepsakes. I told her I would go immediately. I drove to the house with the spare key she had given me 5 years ago, a heavy brass thing that felt warm in my palm. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of silence that usually comforted me, but today it felt heavy. When I unlocked the front door, the smell hit me. It was not just the scent of lavender and old paper that I associated with my grandmother. It was the smell of stagnation. The house felt like a lung that had stopped breathing. I walked straight to the study. My footsteps echoed too loudly on the hardwood floors. The room was exactly as she had left it. Or so I thought at first glance. The velvet curtains were drawn, casting the room in a dim, sepia light. I went to the bookshelf for the album, finding it easily. Then I moved to the vintage secretaire desk in the corner. Vivian had a small, hidden cabinet behind the knee-hole panel, a place she kept her most private correspondence and the blue binder she had mentioned the day before. I crouched down and reached for the latch. It was already unhooked. A cold prickle of dread walked down my spine. I pulled the panel open. The space inside, usually organized with military precision, was a chaotic mess. Envelopes were torn open. Rubber bands lay snapped on the floor of the cabinet. But the most terrifying thing was the empty rectangular space in the center. The dust outline was clearly visible. A perfect ghost of where the blue binder and the deed box had sat for decades. The inheritance file, the specific legal structure she had built for me, was gone. I sat back on my heels, the silence of the house suddenly roaring in my ears. This was not a burglary. There was no broken glass, no forced entry at the front door. This was an extraction. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and dialed my mother. Marilyn answered on the 3rd ring, her voice breathless and distracted. "Mom," I said, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice. "I am at Grandma's house. I came to get some photos. The study. Someone has been in the safe. The files are gone." There was a pause on the line, just a fraction of a second too long to be natural. "Oh, that," Marilyn said, her tone breezy. "Your father went over to secure some documents. We did not want sensitive information just lying around an empty house. You know how people talk. But everything is gone. Mom. Including the things she told me were mine. Douglas is handling it. Reese, stop being dramatic. We are in the middle of something important here. I have to go." The line went dead before I could say another word. The dismissal stung, but beneath the sting was a rapidly growing panic. I grabbed the photo album, locked the house, and got back into my car. I did not drive back to the hospice. I drove straight to my parents' estate. As I turned into their long, paved driveway, the The sun glared off something metallic and massive, parked right in front of the double oak doors. I squinted. It was a brand new SUV, a white Range Rover, gleaming under the afternoon sun. So large it looked like a tank designed for suburban warfare, and sitting on the hood, obscene in its cheerfulness, was a giant red bow. My stomach dropped. I parked my 10-year-old sedan behind it, the engine sputtering as I killed the ignition. Before I could even unbuckle, the front door of the house flew open. Brielle came bounding out, her hair perfectly blown out, wearing a cashmere set that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She was dangling a key fob in the air, her face lit up with a triumph that made her look like a predator. "Look," she squealed, gesturing to the behemoth behind me. "Can you believe it? It even has the heated massage seats I wanted." I stepped out of my car, my legs feeling heavy. "What is this? Brielle?" "It is my engagement gift," she beamed, pressing the unlock button just to hear the chirp. "Well, pre-engagement gift. Mom said the Honda looked tragic next to Landon's Porsche, so they surprised me. It is perfect for the image, right? The Pikes are going to love it." I looked at the car, then at the house. My father, Douglas, was standing in the doorway, holding a tumbler of scotch. He looked satisfied, like a general surveying a conquered field. I walked past Brielle, ignoring her squeals, and marched up the steps to face him. "Where did the money come from, Dad?" Douglas took a slow sip of his drink. "Hello to you too. Reese, nice to see you." "The file is gone from Grandma's house," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "This car costs at least $80,000. Where did you get $80,000 in cash overnight?" Douglas shrugged, a motion that was infuriatingly casual. Vivian had a liquidity account that was just sitting there, accumulating dust. She is not using it. Reese. She is in a bed she will never leave. "That was not your money," I snapped. "She told me specifically. She had plans for those funds. She told me yesterday." Marilyn appeared behind Douglas, wiping her hands on a linen napkin. "Plans change, honey. Needs change. Brielle is entering a very competitive social bracket. We have to make sure she is equipped." "Equipped?" I stared at them, horrified. "You looted a dying woman's savings to buy a status symbol? Grandma promised me that money was for my security. For a house." Douglas laughed, a short, barking sound. "A house? Reese, be realistic. You work for a youth arts program. You make peanuts. A large asset like that would just be a burden to you. Taxes, maintenance, you cannot handle that. This car is an investment in your sister's future. When she marries Landon, the return on investment will benefit the whole family." "It is theft," I said, the word tasting like bile. "I am going to tell her. I am going back to hospice right now, and I am telling her what you did." The air in the entryway froze. Marilyn stepped forward, her face losing all its social warmth. She looked suddenly dangerous. "You will do no such thing," she hissed, her voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. "Your grandmother is hanging by a thread. Her heart is failing. If you walk into that room and dump this stress on her, if you tell her we stole from her and cause a cardiac event, her death will be on your hands." I recoiled as if she had slapped me. "Think about it, Reese," Douglas added, his voice smooth and reasonable again. "Do you want her last moment on Earth to be realizing her family is fighting over money? Do you want to be the one who kills her with disappointment? Or do you want to be the good daughter who lets her drift away in peace?" I looked at them, my father, swirling his scotch, and my mother, staring me down with cold, hard eyes. They had weaponized my own empathy against me. They knew I would never risk hurting Vivian, and they were banking on that silence to cover their greed. I turned around and looked at the driveway. Brielle was sitting in the driver's seat of the new Rover, taking a selfie with the steering wheel. She didn't look like a sister. She looked like a stranger eating the fruit of a poisoned tree. "You didn't just take the money," I said quietly, though I knew they didn't care to hear it. "You took her dignity." "We took charge," Douglas corrected. "Now, go wash your face. You look tired, and when you go back to the hospice, you smile. Do you understand?" I walked back to my car without answering. I looked at the shiny key in Brielle's hand through the window. It wasn't just a key to a car. It was the key to my silence, forged in the fire of their emotional blackmail. They thought they had won because they held the checkbook. But as I gripped my own steering wheel, I realized they had taken something else from me too. They had taken the last shred of illusion that this family was anything other than a beautiful, rotting facade. My apartment door jammed when I tried to unlock it, a quirk that usually made me sigh with resignation. But tonight, it made me want to scream. I shoved my shoulder against the wood, forcing the bolt to slide, and stumbled into the darkness of my entryway. The air inside was stale, smelling faintly of the neighbors' burnt garlic and my own exhaustion. I flipped on the light, and for the first time in the 4 years I had lived here, the space felt suffocating. It was a studio, barely 500 square feet, with a kitchenette that doubled as a hallway and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. I had always told myself it was cozy. I had told myself it was noble to live simply while doing work that mattered. But as I dropped my keys on the scratched laminate counter, the image of that white Range Rover with the red bow burned behind my eyelids. $80,000. My parents had spent $80,000 of my grandmother's money she had explicitly earmarked for my stability, to buy my sister a toy, simply because she was marrying into the right tax bracket. I sank onto my second-hand sofa, the springs groaning under my weight. The injustice of it did not feel like anger anymore. It felt like a physical weight, pressing down on my chest until it was hard to draw breath. It was not just the money. If I were honest with myself, it had never really been about the money. It was about the measurement of worth. For 33 years, I had been the good one, the practical one, the one who did not need attention, so I never got any. Brielle was the firework, loud, bright, and expensive to maintain. I was the pavement she exploded over. My parents loved us both, I supposed, But they loved Brielle with ambition, and they loved me with relief. They were relieved they did not have to worry about me, so they stopped thinking about me altogether. "Reese will understand," my mother would say when they missed my graduation for Brielle's pageants. "Reese is sensible," my father would say when they paid for Brielle's credit card debt, but told me to take out loans for my master's degree. And now, they were banking on that sensibility to cover up a crime. My mother's voice echoed in the quiet room, toxic and terrifying. "If you tell her, her death will be on your hands." I pulled my knees to my chest. It was the perfect trap. They knew I loved Vivian more than I loved justice. They knew I would swallow the bile and smile through the funeral, rather than risk causing her pain in her final hours. I was the keeper of the peace, even if the peace was killing me. My eyes wandered to the wooden box I had retrieved from Vivian's house earlier that day. In the chaos of discovering the theft, I had almost forgotten it. It sat on my small coffee table, an old cedar chest with brass hinges, polished by decades of handling. Vivian had asked for it. She wanted the photos. I reached out and opened the lid. The smell of cedar and old perfume wafted up, a scent so distinctly her that my throat tightened. Inside, there were stacks of black and white photos, bundles of letters tied with silk ribbon, and trinkets from her travels. I picked up a photo of her from the 70s, standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, looking fierce and alive. She looked like a woman who took no prisoners. I dug deeper, my fingers brushing against the velvet lining at the bottom. That was when I felt it. A loose edge. I frowned and pulled at the lining. It wasn't just a lining. It was a false bottom. Beneath the velvet lay a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with wax, but the seal had cracked with age. On the front, in Vivian's sharp, angular handwriting, were 4 words: "When you need to understand." My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at the date scrawled in the corner. It was dated 3 years ago, long before the hospice, long before the engagement. I tore the envelope open. Inside was not a sentimental letter, but a photocopy of a legal document. It was a durable power of attorney, but it was heavily annotated in the margins in Vivian's own hand. And clipped to it was a note on her personal stationery. I unfolded the note. "Reese, if you are reading this, it means Douglas has done what I always feared he would do. He has confused family money with his money. I love your father, but he has always believed that appearance is more important than substance, and your mother believes that truth is flexible. I have not left my affairs to chance, even if they think I have, and I know they will try to maneuver when I get weak. They will count on you being too polite to fight back. They mistake your kindness for weakness. Do not let them. The truth can be a sharp knife. My dear, it might hurt when you cut the rot out, but if you leave the rot, it kills the whole body. Do not protect them from the consequences of their own greed. It is not your job to hide their sins. Bring me the truth, even if it is ugly, especially if it is ugly. Love, Grandma." I stared at the paper, my hands trembling. She knew. She had known for years that this day might come. She had watched Douglas and Marilyn, watched their vanity and their entitlement, and she had prepared a contingency. She hadn't just left me money. She had left me a map. The guilt that Marilyn had planted in my chest, the fear that the truth would kill Vivian, began to evaporate. Vivian was not a fragile flower who needed to be shielded from reality. She was a matriarch who demanded respect. By hiding the theft, I wasn't protecting her. I was insulting her intelligence. I was treating her like a child, just as Douglas and Marilyn were. If I stayed silent, I wasn't being the good daughter. I was being an accomplice. I was helping them gaslight a dying woman. I stood up. The note clutched in my hand like a shield. The cramped apartment didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt like a war room. I looked at the clock on the stove. It was 2 a.m. I was done being the pavement. I walked to my bedroom and set the alarm for 5 o'clock. I needed to be at the hospice before Douglas or Marilyn arrived for their performance. I needed to get there while the morning was still quiet, before the lies could put their shoes on. I placed the cream envelope on my nightstand, right next to my phone. It looked stark against the cheap laminate wood, a declaration of war, written in elegant cursive. I turned off the lamp and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. I knew tomorrow would be brutal. I knew my mother would scream, and my father would threaten. I knew Brielle would cry about her ruined engagement celebration, but for the first time in my life, the fear of their reaction was smaller than the fear of losing myself. I closed my eyes, picturing Vivian's face. "Bring me the truth," she had said. "I will," I whispered into the darkness. "I promise." The morning light filtering through the hospice blinds was gray and thin, casting long, pale stripes across the sterile linoleum floor. It was barely 6 o'clock in the morning. The facility was quiet, save for the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the squeak of a nurse's shoes far down the hall. I sat in the hard plastic chair next to Grandma Vivian's bed, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles had turned white. Vivian was awake, though she had not spoken yet. She was watching me. Her breathing was shallow, a rattle living deep in her chest, but her eyes were clear. They stripped away the defenses I had spent the entire night building. "Say it," she whispered. Her voice was like dry leaves scraping over concrete. "You look like you are carrying a stone. Reese, put it down." I took a breath. It felt jagged in my throat. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in the car ride over, practicing the gentle way to break a heart. But looking at her now, I realized there was no gentle way to tell someone they had been betrayed by their own blood. "I went to the house," I said. My voice was steady, surprising even me. "I went to get the album and the box. The safe was open. Grandma, the blue binder is gone. The deed box is empty." Vivian did not blink. She did not gasp. She just kept watching me, her face unreadable. "I drove to Mom and Dad's," I continued, forcing the words out before I lost my nerve. "There is a new car in the driveway, a white Range Rover. It has a red bow on the hood. Brielle says it is her engagement gift. Dad told me he used the liquidity account, the one you set aside. He said you weren't using it. He said it was an investment in the family image. I paused, waiting for the anger, the tears, the denial. But Vivian remained perfectly still. And when I said I was going to tell you, I finished, my voice dropping to a whisper. Mom told me that if I did, the stress would kill you. She said your death would be on my hands. I stopped. The silence that filled the room was heavy, suffocating. I braced myself for her to crumble. I expected the heartbreak of a mother realizing her son was a thief. But Vivian did not cry. She closed her eyes for a long moment, and then she let out a sigh. It was not a sigh of sadness. It was a sigh of exhaustion. The sound of a person who had read the last page of a book and found exactly the ending she had predicted. So, she said, opening her eyes again. The steel was back in them, harder than before. They finally did it. I wondered how long they would wait. I stared at her. You are not shocked? I am disappointed. Reese, there is a difference. She shifted slightly, wincing as pain shot through her frail body. But she waved away my hand when I reached out to help. Tell me the details. Exactly as they happened. Who is the car registered to? I didn't see the registration. I stammered, confused by the shift in her tone. She sounded less like a grandmother and more like a prosecutor. Think, she commanded softly. Did Douglas brag about it? Did he say, my car? Or her car? He said it was an asset, I recalled, the memory of his smug face making my stomach turn. He said he handled the transfer, but Brielle has the keys. She acts like she owns it. And the narrative? Vivian asked sharply. What is the story they are telling people? That you gave it to them, I said. That you wanted Brielle to have a head start. Dad told me you were too confused to manage your assets, so he stepped in to protect the estate. Vivian let out a dry, humorless laugh that turned into a cough. When she recovered, her expression was terrifyingly cold. Confused, is that right? Grandma, I am so sorry, I said, tears finally stinging my eyes. I didn't want to tell you this. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't hurt me, child. You armed me. She pointed a trembling finger toward the nightstand. My phone. Get it. I hesitated. Grandma, you need to rest. Your heart rate. My heart will beat exactly as long as it needs to, she snapped. Give me the phone. I picked up her old smartphone and placed it in her hand. It looked enormous in her wasted grip. She didn't scroll through her contacts. She dialed a number from memory, her fingers moving slowly, but with deliberate purpose. She put the phone to her ear and waited. It is Vivian, she said into the receiver. The room was so quiet I could almost hear the scratch of a voice on the other end, though the words were indistinguishable. Yes, Vivian said. It has happened. Douglas crossed the line. She listened for a moment, her gaze fixed on a water stain on the ceiling tiles. No, she said firmly. We do not wait. We proceed with the contingency. I want you to bring the master file. The original, not the copies. My heart hammered against my ribs. Who was she talking to? A lawyer? A bank manager? Friday night, Vivian continued. They are hosting a dinner. I know my son. He will want to show off his new toy to the Pike family. He will make a toast. He will talk about sacrifice and legacy. She paused, listening again. A small, grim smile touched the corner of her lips. Exactly. Walk in right then. Do not knock. Just walk in and read it to them. Every word. She hung up the phone and let it drop onto the sheets. The effort seemed to have drained her, her skin turning a shade grayer, but the fire in her eyes was blazing. Who was that? I asked, my voice barely audible. The only person in this town who hates liars as much as I do, she murmured. She turned her head to face me. Reese, listen to me carefully. The dinner is on Friday. Is that correct? Yes. I nodded. They are introducing the Pikes to the extended family. They want to show off the car. You will go, she said. I can't. I shook my head violently. I can't go there and pretend everything is fine. I can't watch them lie about you while they drink champagne bought with your money. You will not pretend, Vivian said. You will witness. She reached out and took my hand again. Her grip was weak, but the intention behind it was iron. Do not say a word to them about this conversation. Let them think you are cowed. Let them think you are the quiet, obedient Reese they have always ignored. Let them feel safe. Why? Because arrogance is the best anesthetic, she whispered. When they feel safe, they will get sloppy. They will brag. They will lie bigger and louder because they think no one can check them. And that is when we catch them. I don't know if I can do it, I admitted. Mom is terrifying when she is cornered. You are a Patterson, Vivian said, her voice fierce. But you are the only one who inherited my spine instead of my bank account. You do not need to fight them. Reese, you do not need to scream or throw wine. You just need to stand there and make sure the door is unlocked. For the person you called? For the truth, she corrected. Now, go. Go to work. Be normal. If Douglas asks, tell him I was sleeping. Tell him I was confused. Feed their story until it chokes them. I stood up, feeling a strange sensation wash over me. I had walked into this room carrying the weight of a victim, expecting to comfort a dying woman. I was walking out as an operative. I love you, Grandma, I said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Her skin was cool and smelled of lavender soap. I know, she whispered, closing her eyes. Now go. We have work to do. I walked out of the room and into the long, sterile hallway. The beep of the monitors sounded different now. It didn't sound like a countdown to death anymore. It sounded like a clock ticking down to 0. My parents thought they had buried the truth in a hospice bed, silenced by morphine and guilt. They had no idea that one phone call had just turned their victory dinner into a trial. And I was the only one who knew The verdict was already written. The address Vivian gave me led to a brick building in the older part of town, wedged between a shoe repair shop and a bakery that had been closed since the 90s. There was no glass facade, no marble lobby, and definitely no receptionist with a headset. The brass plaque next to the door simply read, Grant Holloway, Attorney at Law. I walked up the creaking stairs to the second floor. The air smelled of dust and binding glue. When I pushed open the frosted glass door, I found myself in a room that looked less like a law office and more like a fortress built of paper. Stacks of manila folders lined every surface, towering in wobbly columns that seemed to defy gravity. Behind a desk buried under legal pads sat a man who looked like he had been carved out of the same oak as the furniture. Grant Holloway was not young, but he did not look old either. He looked timeless, in the way mountains do. He was wearing a gray suit that had gone out of style 20 years ago, but was pressed to perfection. He didn't look up when I entered. He just pointed a pen at the empty wooden chair opposite him. "You are early," he said. His voice was gravelly, a baritone that seemed to vibrate in the small room. "Vivian said you would be punctual. Sit down, Reese." I sat. The chair was hard and uncomfortable. "Grandma called you?" "Vivian and I speak every Tuesday," Grant said, finally looking up. His eyes were dark and intelligent, framed by heavy brows. "Yesterday was an exception. She called to tell me the vultures had finally started circling." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick file folder. It was not manila like the others. It was red. He placed it on the desk with a heavy thud. "Your grandmother is a brilliant woman, Reese, but she is also a realist. She knew that your father, Douglas, has a complicated relationship with the concept of ownership. He believes that because he carries the Patterson name, he is entitled to the Patterson assets." Grant opened the file. "Vivian spent the last 5 years building a firewall to prevent exactly what happened yesterday." "The money," I said, my throat dry. "The liquidity account." "We will get to the cash in a minute," Grant said, holding up a hand. "First, you need to understand the landscape. Douglas walks around that estate like he is the lord of the manor. He tells his friends at the club that he manages the family portfolio. He tells your mother that their lifestyle is secured by his shrewd investments." Grant slid a document across the desk toward me. It was a property deed. "Twist number 1, Grant said, tapping the paper. "Your parents do not own the house they live in. They do not own the vacation cottage at the lake. They do not own the artwork on the walls." I stared at the document. "But they have lived there for 30 years. Dad always says—" "Douglas says a lot of things," Grant interrupted. "Vivian allowed them to live there. She granted them right of use and tenancy at will, but the title, the legal ownership, it never transferred. It is all still in Vivian's name, held with an irrevocable living trust. Douglas has been paying the utilities and the taxes, which he thinks makes it his. Legally, he is just a very glorified house-sitter." My head was spinning. My father's entire identity was wrapped up in that house. It was his stage. Why didn't she tell him? Because she wanted him to feel like a man, Grant said bluntly. And she wanted to see if he would treat the property with respect, without her name on the mailbox. He failed that test when he started borrowing against the equity he thought he had. Grant flipped a page in the file. Now, let us talk about the $80,000. The money for the car. He pulled out another sheet, this one filled with bank transaction codes. This is the part that stops being a family dispute and starts being a felony, Grant said. His voice dropped an octave, losing its storytelling cadence and becoming sharp and cold. Vivian set up a specific sub-account 3 years ago. It was designated as the Reese Patterson Trust. It is not a suggestion. It is a legal entity. The funds in that account are beneficiary designated. They belong to you, Reese, not to the estate, to you. Dad said he used a power of attorney, I said, remembering Douglas's dismissive wave. He said he was protecting the assets. A power of attorney is not a blank check, Grant snapped. It grants a fiduciary duty. That means Douglas can only spend Vivian's money for Vivian's benefit. Buying a luxury vehicle for his youngest daughter to impress her fiancé's parents does not benefit Vivian. It is a direct breach of fiduciary duty. And because he accessed a beneficiary-designated account to do it, it is misappropriation of funds. In plain English, he stole from you, and he stole from his dying mother. I felt sick. I had known it was wrong, but hearing it laid out in legal terms made it real. It wasn't just mean. It was criminal. He thinks he is safe because he has the power of attorney document, Grant continued. He thinks that piece of paper shields him. But here is the catch. Vivian signed a document last week, a document I notarized personally, that updated her capacity statement. It confirms she is of sound mind. It also explicitly revokes any previous permissions regarding that specific account. Grant leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. If Douglas moved that money, he either forged a signature or he used an expired authority. Either way, he walked into a bear trap. He doesn't know, I whispered. No. He thinks you are just the quiet daughter who teaches art to poor kids. He thinks you do not know the difference between a probate asset and a trust distribution. He thinks he can bully you into silence because he pays for the Thanksgiving turkey. Grant picked up a pen and grabbed a yellow legal pad. He started writing a list, his pen scratching loudly against the paper. I need you to work. Reese, we have 3 days before this dinner. I cannot walk in there with hearsay. I need documentation. He tore the sheet off and handed it to me. Evidence checklist. The transaction receipt for the vehicle. I need to know the exact date and time the funds were wired, the dealership name, any text messages or emails from your mother or father discussing the car, the money, or the need to keep it secret. A photo of the VIN number, if you can get it. A witness statement from anyone else who heard Douglas claim the money was his to spend. Can you get this? Grant asked. I looked at the list. It felt like spycraft. I can try. Brielle texts me everything. She brags, and Dad gets careless when he drinks. Good, Grant said. Save everything. Screenshot it. Back it up to a cloud drive they cannot access. Do not confront them. Do not ask suspicious questions. Just let them talk. People like Douglas love the sound of their own voice. If you stay quiet long enough, he will confess to everything just to fill the silence. I stood up, clutching the yellow paper. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was adrenaline. "What happens on Friday?" I asked. "Friday is the execution," Grant said, closing the red file. "We are going to give them a chance to do the right thing. And when they refuse, which they will, we are going to drop the hammer." He stood up and walked me to the door. As I reached for the handle, he stopped me. "Reese," he said. I turned back. He was looking at me with a strange expression, something between pity and respect. "Do not feel guilty," he said. "They did not just steal the money. They stole your autonomy. They did this when Vivian was weak because they were banking on something very specific. They were not banking on Douglas being smart. They were banking on you being scared. They believed you would never dare to flip the table." He opened the door for me. "Prove them wrong." I walked out into the cool afternoon air. The city noise rushed back in. Cars honking. People talking. The hum of life. But inside my head, it was quiet. I had a checklist. I had a lawyer. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just Reese the doormat. I was the one holding the match. The list Grant Holloway had given me burned a hole in my pocket. But as I sat in my car outside the Northbridge Youth Arts Program, I realized I did not need to be a forensic accountant to find the evidence. I just needed to look at my sister's Instagram. Brielle had not just posted the car. She had documented the entry and acquisition process with the thoroughness of a crime scene photographer who didn't know she was at a crime scene. There were stories saved to a highlight reel titled Wifey Era. I tapped through them, my finger hovering over the screen to pause on the details. There was a photo of the contract sitting on a mahogany desk. The text was blurry, but the dealership logo was crisp. Northbridge Luxury Imports. There was a boomerang video of champagne glasses clinking. In the background, my father was signing a document. And then, the smoking gun. A close-up of the dashboard to show off the digital display. In the bottom corner, reflected in the glass, was a piece of paper taped to the windshield. The temporary registration. It was small, but I zoomed in until the pixels fragmented. The name on the registration was not Vivian Patterson. It was not even Douglas Patterson. It was Brielle Patterson. They hadn't just bought it for her. They had titled it in her name immediately. I switched apps and found the number for Northbridge Luxury Imports. I put on my best, efficient personal assistant voice, the one I used when I had to negotiate with vendors for the art program. "Good morning," I said, when a smooth-talking salesman answered. "This is Reese, calling on behalf of Douglas Patterson. He is concerned that the wire transfer receipt for the Range Rover purchase on Monday might not have cleared his records correctly. He wanted me to verify the exact time the funds were posted to your account, so he can reconcile his ledger." "Oh, hello," the salesman said, his guard completely down. "Mr. Patterson was such a pleasure to work with. Let me pull that up. Yes, here it is. The wire for $84,000 hit our account at 10:30 in the morning on Monday. It came from a trust account ending in 409. Smooth transaction. 10:30, I repeated, writing it down on the back of a parking ticket. And that covered the full purchase price, including tax and title. Every penny. He didn't want his daughter to have a single monthly payment. A very generous gift. Very, I said, my voice tight. Thank you. I hung up. 10:30 on Monday. At 10:30 on Monday, I had been holding Grandma Vivian's hand while she slept, and my father had been draining her life savings to buy prestige. That evening, I had to stop by my parents' house to pick up a suit my father wanted dry cleaned for the Friday dinner. The request itself was insulting. He treated me like a courier service, but it gave me access. The house was buzzing with pre-party energy. Florists were carrying in massive arrangements of white lilies. My mother, Marilyn, was directing them like a traffic cop. No, not there, she barked. The foyer needs to look expansive. Put those in the dining room. She spotted me and waved a hand dismissively. The suit is in the study. Reese. And while you are in there, check if Brielle left her iPad. She needs it for her wedding planning. I walked into the study. It was quiet, smelling of leather and my father's expensive cologne. The suit was hanging on the door, but my eyes went straight to the desk. Brielle's iPad was there, sitting open on top of a stack of bills. I walked over. I didn't mean to snoop, but a notification banner dropped down from the top of the screen. It was a text from Mom. Marilyn, do not wear the red dress. It is too aggressive. Wear the blue. And remember, if Aunt Sarah asks about the car, just smile and say Grandma insisted. We need the narrative to be consistent. I felt a cold flush of anger. I tapped the message to open the thread. I scrolled up. 2 days ago, right after I had left the house, Marilyn had sent another message. Reese knows about the account. She is upset, but she won't do anything. She is too soft. Just keep her busy with the hospice visits. If she is tired, she won't ask questions. I took my phone out and snapped a photo of the screen. She won't do anything. The certainty in her words was what hurt the most. It wasn't just a prediction. It was a judgment of my character. They relied on my love for them to facilitate their abuse of me. I heard a voice from the hallway and froze. It was my father. He was not alone. He was on speakerphone, his voice booming with false conviviality. Listen, Jim, I am telling you, the liquidity is there, Douglas was saying. I am looking to leverage the Elm Street property for the new venture. The equity is sitting dead. I can pull $150,000 out of it by next month. I pressed myself against the bookshelf, my heart hammering. The Elm Street property. That was Grandma's house. Grant Holloway had told me explicitly that the house was in a trust. Douglas didn't own it. He couldn't leverage it. Yeah, well, the title work is a formality. Douglas laughed, answering a question I couldn't hear. My mother is retiring. I have full control of the estate. The house is as good as mine. He was not just stealing the cash. He was already selling the walls around Vivian's memories before she had even taken her last breath. He was lying to his business partners, committing fraud on a loan application, all based on the assumption that he was the king of a castle he didn't own. I slipped out of the study before he came in. Grabbing the suit and the iPad, I handed the tablet to Brielle in the hallway. She didn't say thank you. She just snatched it and kept walking. As I was heading for the door, Aunt Sarah intercepted me. She was a kind woman, usually, but she was also a gossip who absorbed the family narrative like a sponge. "Reese, honey," she said, grabbing my arm and squeezing it sympathetically. "I just heard." "Heard what?" I asked, bracing myself. "About what you did for Brielle." She beamed, her eyes misty. "Douglas told us how you insisted that your grandmother use your portion of the inheritance to buy that car for your sister. He said you told him, 'Brielle needs it more than I do.' That is so noble of you, Reese, to sacrifice your share like that." The room seemed to tilt. They hadn't just stolen the money. They had stolen my consent. They had rewritten the story to make me the willing martyr. The saintly sister who was happy to have nothing so the golden child could have everything. If I spoke up now, I wouldn't just be exposing a theft. I would be contradicting a beautiful lie they had already sold to the extended family. I would look like a liar who regretted her generosity. "Dad said that?" I asked, my voice hollow. "He was tearing up when he told us," Sarah said. "He is so proud of you." I walked out of the house feeling like I was going to vomit. The next day, at the Northbridge Youth Arts Program, I tried to bury myself in spreadsheets. I had a grant proposal due for the summer mural project, but the numbers kept swimming before my eyes. Every time I looked at a budget line item, I saw $84,000. That money could have funded our program for 2 years. It could have bought a house where I wouldn't have to shoulder check my front door to open it. "Reese?" I looked up. Marcus, one of my senior students, was standing in the doorway of my office. He was holding a sketchbook, looking concerned. "You have been staring at that same page for 20 minutes, he said. "You look gray." "I am fine, Marcus." I lied, forcing a smile. "Just a lot of paperwork, family stuff." He didn't buy it. He walked in and sat on the edge of my desk. "Is it your grandma? The one who liked my drawings?" "She is still with us," I said. "But it is hard." "You look like someone is standing on your chest," Marcus said bluntly. He was a kid who had grown up in a rough neighborhood. He knew what stress looked like. "Whatever it is, do not let them win. You always tell us that. Stand your ground, right?" I looked at this kid, who had to fight for every scrap of opportunity he got. And I felt a sudden surge of shame. I was 33 years old, and I was letting my parents walk all over me because I was afraid of a scene. Marcus was right. "Right," I said, my voice firmer. "Stand your ground." When I got home that evening, there was a heavy cream envelope in my mailbox. The calligraphy was professional. I tore it open right there in the hallway. It was the formal invitation for Friday night. The Patterson family cordially invites you to a dinner in honor of the union of Brielle Patterson and Landon Pike. And below that, in smaller, italicized font, with a special tribute honoring the generosity and legacy of Vivian Patterson. I stared at the paper. They were going to toast her. They were going to raise glasses of expensive wine and praise her name, using her legacy as a prop for their vanity, while she lay dying in a hospice bed 10 miles away, stripped of her assets by the very son holding the microphone. It was the final piece of evidence Grant didn't ask for, but it was the one that sealed my resolve. They weren't just thieves, they were vultures in tuxedos. I walked into my apartment and taped the invitation to the wall, right next to the yellow checklist Grant had given me. Transaction receipt. Confirmed. Dealership. Confirmed. Texts. Captured. Witness to the lie. Aunt Sarah. The audacity. The invitation. I had everything. I took out my phone and texted Grant Holloway. I have the proof. And I know about the house. They are trying to leverage it. Grant's reply came 2 minutes later. Bring everything on Friday. Wear comfortable shoes. We are not just going to stop them, we are going to break the cycle. I looked at the invitation one last time, honoring Vivian Patterson. Oh, we will honor her, I said to the empty room. We will honor her with the one thing you people hate the most, the truth. Friday arrived with a sky the color of bruised plums, threatening a storm that never quite broke. My phone rang at 2 in the afternoon. It was Marilyn. Her voice was not the sharp, hissing whisper she had used 3 days ago. It was coated in a sugary glaze that made my teeth ache. "Reese, darling," she cooed. "We are running a bit behind with the florist. Could you come over early, just to help coordinate the caterers? We want everything to be perfect for the Pikes." It was a trap. Of course. They didn't need a coordinator, they needed a prop. They needed the good daughter visible and subservient to smooth over the edges of their chaotic vanity. If I was there, fetching ice and holding doors. It reinforced the hierarchy. Brielle was the princess, and I was the lady-in-waiting. "I will be there in an hour," I said. I dressed carefully. I put on the navy blue dress Marilyn had approved, but I paired it with the pearl earrings Vivian had given me for my 21st birthday. They felt heavy against my lobes, a physical reminder of who I was actually representing tonight. When I pulled into the driveway, the white Range Rover was positioned like a statue in a museum, angled perfectly to catch the light from the porch lanterns. Brielle was already outside, holding court with 3 of our cousins who had arrived early. She was wearing a cream silk dress that looked like it would stain if you looked at it too hard. "It drives like a dream," I heard Brielle say as I walked up the path. She patted the hood of the car affectionately. "Reese is so terrified of big cars. Aren't you, Reese? She still drives that little sedan from college. It is cute, in a quaint sort of way." The cousins turned to look at me with pitying smiles. "Sensible," Cousin Sarah said. "Reese is always so sensible." "Someone has to be," I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Brielle laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, stop. You just don't like nice things. You think suffering builds character or something." She turned back to the car. "Landon says this fits my brand perfectly." I walked past them into the house. The interior was transformed. The smell of lilies was overwhelming, masking the underlying scent of old wood and secrets. Douglas was in the living room, arranging bottles of scotch on a silver tray. He looked up as I entered, his eyes scanning me for any sign of rebellion, finding none. He relaxed. "Good," he said. "Check the ice buckets in the dining room and make sure the coasters are out. The Pikes are very particular about water rings." "Yes, Dad," I said. The doorbell rang at 6 o'clock sharp. The air in the house instantly tightened. This was it. The audition. The Pikes swept in like a weather front. Landon Pike was handsome in a generic catalog way, but his parents, Harrison and Eleanor, were terrifying. They didn't just look at people, they assessed them. Eleanor Pike's eyes darted around the foyer, lingering on the crown molding and the Persian rug, calculating the value per square foot. "Douglas, Marilyn," Harrison Pike boomed, shaking hands. "Lovely home, truly. You don't see craftsmanship like this in the new builds." "Thank you, Harrison," Douglas said, puffing out his chest. "It has been in the family for generations. We believe in holding on to our legacy. It is the foundation we build everything else on." I stood by the kitchen door, holding a tray of appetizers, and wrote that sentence down in my memory. In the family for generations. He was claiming ownership of a house he was merely occupying. "And this must be the sister," Eleanor Pike said, turning her gaze on me. It felt like being scanned by a barcode reader. "Reese, is it?" "The teacher." "Program administrator," I corrected gently. "For the Northbridge Youth Arts." "How charming," Eleanor said, losing interest immediately. She turned back to Brielle, who was clinging to Landon's arm. "Brielle, darling, that car out front is magnificent. Douglas told us he wanted to make sure you were safe on the road." "Safety is paramount," Douglas interjected smoothly. "We wanted to do everything we could for our youngest. You know how it is. You want to give them the world." I stood there, invisible in plain sight. The narrative had shifted again. Aunt Sarah had been told I sacrificed my share. But for the Pikes, Douglas was the sole provider. The benevolent patriarch with endless resources. I wasn't the martyr anymore. I was just the background noise. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I set the tray down on a side table and slipped into the hallway to check it. It was a text from Grant Holloway. "Doctor, Evans has just left the hospice. He conducted a full cognitive evaluation 30 minutes ago. Vivian scored 29 out of 30. She is fully lucid, fully capable, and furious. The affidavit is signed. I am printing the file now." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. They couldn't claim she was confused. They couldn't claim she didn't know what she was doing. The trap was armed. "Reese!" I jumped. Brielle was standing behind me in the narrow hallway leading to the powder room. Her smile was gone. Her eyes were darting nervously toward the living room where the laughter was getting louder. "What are you doing on your phone?" she hissed. "Mom needs you to refill the wine." "I am checking on Grandma," I lied smoothly. "Since no one else seems to remember she exists." Brielle flinched. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. The scent of her expensive perfume was suffocating. "Look," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I know you are pissed about the car. I get it. Okay? It is unfair." I stared at her. This was the closest she had ever come to an apology. But it wasn't an apology. It was a negotiation. "But you have to understand," she continued, her desperation leaking through. "This night is huge for me. If the Pikes think we are messy, or that we have money problems, they will talk. Landon's mom is brutal." She reached out and touched my arm. "Just let it go for tonight. Please. Once the wedding is over, once I am settled, I will make it right. I will talk to Dad. We can work something out. Maybe I can give you $10,000 from the wedding gift money. We can split it later." I looked down at her hand on my arm. Split it later. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was offering me a bribe with money she didn't even have yet. She knew. She knew the money was stolen. She knew the car was a lie. And she was willing to be an accessory to fraud just to keep her engagement party perfect. I gently removed her hand from my arm. "You think this is about the money, Brielle?" I asked softly. "Everything is about money," she snapped, her mask slipping. "Don't act like you are above it. $10,000 is a lot for someone with your salary. I don't want a cut of the loot." "Brielle," I said, my voice steady and cold. "And I don't want to help you defraud your future in-laws." "It is not fraud," she whispered furiously. "It is just presenting the best version of ourselves." "It is theft," I said. "And tonight, you are going to learn the difference." I walked past her, leaving her standing in the hallway with her mouth open. As I re-entered the living room, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Marilyn. She was standing across the room, laughing at something Harrison Pike had said, but she was holding her phone behind her back. I looked at the screen. "Marilyn, I see you sulking. Fix your face. If you ruin this night, if you embarrass us in front of these people, you are done. I will make sure you are cut off from this family forever." I looked up and met Marilyn's eyes across the room. She smiled at me, a sharp, warning baring of teeth. I smiled back. It wasn't the submissive smile she was used to. It was the smile of someone who had just checked the locks and realized she was the only one holding the key. Cut off from the family? I thought, "Mother, you have no idea. By the end of this night, you are going to wish you had cut me off years ago." "More wine, Mrs. Pike?" I asked, stepping forward with the bottle. "Oh, thank you, dear," Eleanor said, barely glancing at me. "Your father was just telling us about how he manages the estate. Such a burden, really. But he handles it with such grace." "Yes," I said, pouring the dark red liquid into her crystal glass. "He certainly has a unique approach to management." I checked my watch. It was 7:45. Grant Holloway would be walking through the front door in 15 minutes. The stage was set, the actors were in place, and the script they were ad-libbing was about to run into a hard, legal reality. The euphoria of my secret rebellion in the hallway lasted exactly 7 minutes. That was how long it took for my father to corner me in the butler's pantry. A narrow slip of a room between the kitchen and the dining area, where we were staging the wine service. I was uncorking a bottle of Cabernet when the door swung shut behind me. I turned to see Douglas standing there. The jovial host mask he had been wearing for the Pikes had vanished, replaced by a complexion that was a dangerous shade of mottled red. "You went to see Grant Holloway," he said. It wasn't a question. It was an indictment. My hand slipped on the corkscrew, but I managed to keep the bottle steady. "I don't know who told you that." "Bill Henderson saw your car parked outside his office on Tuesday." Douglas spat, stepping closer. The smell of his expensive scotch was overpowering in the small space. "Do not lie to me, Reese. You went to that old shark. Why? Are you trying to sue your own family?" Before I could answer, the door opened again and Marilyn slipped in. She closed it softly, locking it. The sound of the lock clicking felt like a gunshot. "We know what you are doing," Marilyn said, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and what looked convincingly like heartbreak. "We know you are trying to manipulate Vivian. You are taking advantage of a confused, dying woman to rewrite the will because you are jealous of your sister." Jealous? I stared at them, incredulous. "You took $84,000 of her money to buy a car, and you think I am the one manipulating her?" "She doesn't know what she is saying," Douglas hissed, slamming his hand on the counter. "She is on morphine. Reese, she is out of her mind. We are the power of attorney. We are the ones protecting her assets from being wasted. If she told you she didn't want Brielle to have that car, it is the dementia talking, and you are sick enough to use that against us. We have already spoken to Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mike," Marilyn added, crossing her arms. "We told them everything. How you have been acting erratic. How you have been pressuring us for money. They know, Reese. If you walk out there and try to make a scene, no one will believe you. They will just see a bitter, greedy daughter trying to ruin her sister's happiness." And I felt the ground wobble beneath me. This was their superpower, gaslighting. They said it with such conviction, with such righteous indignation, that for a split second, I questioned my own reality. Was I being petty? Was Grandma actually confused? Was I the villain in this story? "You are done," Douglas said, his voice dropping to a low, lethal register. "If you do not walk out there right now, smile, and play your part, I will cut you off. You will not get a dime when I die, and you will not be welcome in this house. You will be a stranger to us. And think about your grandmother," Marilyn said, stepping forward and placing a hand on my arm, a mimicry of comfort that felt like a claw. "She has days left. Reese, maybe hours. Do you really want her last memory to be the police coming to her son's house? Do you want her to die knowing she caused a war? If you love her, you will stop this madness. Don't let her die in the middle of a drama you created." Tears pricked my eyes. The guilt was a physical pain. I loved Vivian more than anything. The thought of hurting her, of tarnishing her final exit, was the one thing that could break me. I looked down at the floor. "I just want what is right," I whispered. "Then do what is right," Douglas commanded. "Go out there. Be a sister. And never speak to Grant Holloway again." I almost nodded. I almost put the corkscrew down and surrendered, but then my pocket buzzed. I pulled my phone out, instinctively seeking an escape. The screen lit up with a notification from the encrypted medical portal Grant had shared with me an hour ago. It was a summary of Dr. Evans' evaluation Patient: Vivian Patterson. Date: today. Cognitive assessment score: 29 out of 30. Patient demonstrates full executive function, clear recall of financial assets, and explicit understanding of legal consequences. She wasn't confused. She was sharper than all of us combined. The fog in my brain cleared. My parents weren't protecting Vivian from herself. They were protecting themselves from the truth. I looked up at Douglas. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. She scored 29 out of 30 on her cognitive test this afternoon, I said quietly. Douglas froze. What? Dr. Evans, I said, my voice gaining strength. He visited the hospice at 4 o'clock. Grandma isn't senile. Dad, she is fully lucid, and she knows exactly where her money went. Marilyn's face went pale. You had her tested? I didn't, I said. She requested it, because she knew you would try this. She knew you would call her crazy to cover your tracks. The door handle rattled violently, interrupting us. Mom? Dad? It was Brielle. Open the door, Mrs. Pike is asking for the reserve vintage. Marilyn unlocked the door and Brielle burst in. Looking frantic, she stopped when she saw the tension in the room. Her eyes darted from Douglas's red face to my defiant stance. What is happening? Brielle whispered, panic rising in her voice. Why are you shouting? The Pikes are right there. If they hear you fighting, they will think we are trash. Your sister, Douglas snarled, pointing a shaking finger at me, is trying to destroy this family. She is working with a lawyer to claim the car is stolen property. Brielle turned to me, her eyes wide with horror. Reese, are you insane? You are going to ruin everything. If Landon finds out there is legal trouble, he might call off the wedding. His family doesn't do scandals. Then maybe you shouldn't have bought a scandal and parked it in the driveway, I said. It is just a car, Brielle cried, stamping her foot like a child. Why do you have to be so selfish? You are ruining my future. You are ruining my life because you are jealous that I got something nice. Your future? I stepped closer to her. Brielle, look at me. Your future is being financed by embezzling from a dying woman. You aren't building a life. You are building a crime scene. Stop it! Marilyn shrieked, though she kept her voice at a harsh whisper. No, I said. I am done stopping. You threatened to cut me off, Dad. Go ahead, but you can't cut me off from the truth. And you certainly can't cut Grandma off from her own justice. I checked my watch. 8 o'clock. You have 5 minutes, I said to Douglas. You can go out there and tell the Pikes the truth, that the car was a mistake, a misuse of funds, and you are returning it. Or you can wait. Wait for what? Douglas challenged, though he looked suddenly unsure. For the doorbell, I said. Grant had warned me earlier that day. If they know we are coming, they will try to move the asset. They will try to transfer the title to a third party, or hide the car to complicate the recovery. We have to strike while the iron is hot. I knew Douglas. If I gave him an inch, he would be on the phone with his shady accountant friend within the hour, backdating documents and hiding the money trail. I couldn't let them leave this room and start the cover-up. "Get out of my way," Douglas said, pushing past me toward the door. "I am going to make a call." "I wouldn't do that," I said, turning to face his back. "And why not?" he sneered, hand on the doorknob. "Because," I said, as the front doorbell rang, a long, clear chime that cut through the murmur of the party guests outside. "I think your appointment is here." Douglas stopped. Marilyn grabbed Brielle's hand. The silence in the pantry was absolute. "Who is at the door?" "Reese?" Marilyn asked, her voice trembling. "The one person Grandma trusts," I said. "And he brought receipts." 6 hours before I stood in the butler's pantry watching my father panic. The world was quiet. I was sitting in the hospice room, watching the slow, rhythmic rise and fall of Grandma Vivian's chest. The afternoon light was dying against the blinds, turning the room a bruised purple. The silence here was different from the silence in my parents' house. There, silence was a weapon used to freeze people out. Here, silence was just the sound of time running out. Vivian had been drifting in and out of consciousness since the morning. Her skin was so pale, it looked like it would dissolve if I touched it. I held her hand, feeling the fragile bones beneath the paper-thin skin, and a wave of terror washed over me. It wasn't just the fear of losing her. It was the fear that I wasn't strong enough to finish what we had started. I felt like a fraud in a suit of armor, terrified that the moment the battle began, I would crumble back into the obedient daughter I had been for 33 years. "You are thinking too loud," Vivian whispered. I jumped. Her eyes were open, glassy but fixed on my face. "I am scared, Grandma," I admitted, my voice cracking. "I don't want to hurt them. I know they are wrong, but they are still my family. Dad, he is going to be destroyed." Vivian squeezed my hand. It was a weak pressure, but it grounded me. "I am not doing this to punish Douglas," she said, her voice a rough rasp that required every ounce of her energy to produce. "And I am not doing it to avenge myself. I will be gone soon. Money is no use to a ghost." She took a ragged breath. "I am doing this for you, Reese, so you never have to ask permission to live, so you never have to wait for someone to give you a scrap of what is already yours." Then she turned her head slightly, looking at the wall where a picture of my father as a boy hung. "You think this is his first mistake," she said softly. "But it is not. I gave Douglas 3 chances to run the estate honestly. 3 times. Reese, 10 years ago, when the market crashed, he tried to liquidate your college fund to cover a bad investment. I stopped him then, quietly. I filled the hole with my own savings so you would never know." I stared at her, stunned. "He tried to take my tuition?" "He always chooses the applause," Vivian said, closing her eyes again. "He chooses the appearance of success over the work of success. If we let him keep that car, if we let him steal from you now, he will not stop. He will eat your future until there is nothing left but his ego." I sat back in the hard plastic chair, the revelations settling in my stomach like lead. I had always thought my father was just weak or entitled. I didn't realize he was a predator who had been hunting in his own home for a decade. I stepped out into the hallway to get some air. And that was when my phone rang. It was Brielle. I almost didn't answer. I wasn't ready to hear her bragging or her dismissive tone, but something about the persistent buzzing felt urgent. "Hello?" I answered, keeping my voice flat. "Reese." The voice on the other end didn't sound like the golden child who had just received an $80,000 engagement gift. It sounded small, broken, and terrified. She was crying. Deep, heaving sobs that she was trying to stifle. "Brielle, what is wrong?" "I know," she choked out. "I know about the money. I know where it came from." I stopped walking. "You knew when you took the keys? You knew?" "I didn't want to take it," she cried, her voice rising in hysteria. "I told Mom it felt wrong. I told her we couldn't just use Grandma's trust, but she looked at me with that face. You know the face. She told me if I didn't accept it, I was ungrateful. She said I was sabotaging the family image." "So you went along with it?" I said, my sympathy hardening back into anger. "Because it was easier than standing up to her." "It is not just that," Brielle whispered. The line crackled with silence for a moment. "Reese, Dad is broke, completely broke." The air in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What are you talking about?" "The development project in the city," Brielle said, sniffling. "It collapsed 6 months ago. He owes the bank nearly $500,000. He is leveraging everything just to pay the interest. The car, the party, it is all a show. He thinks if he can impress the Pikes, Landon's dad will invite him into the Capital Group partnership. He needs the Pikes' money to save himself." I leaned against the cold wall, closing my eyes. It all made sense. The desperation, the aggression, the immediate transfer of the car title. It wasn't just greed. It was survival. My father had built a house of cards, and he had stolen my foundation to prop up the last wall. "If you blow this up," Brielle said, her voice trembling, "they won't just be embarrassed. They will be ruined. Landon's parents will run. The bank will call the loans. We will lose the house. We don't own the house. Brielle," I said quietly. "Vivian does. Reese, please," she begged. "Just let it go. We can fix it later. Just don't say anything tonight." I hung up the phone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the linoleum floor. The choice was laid out in front of me, stark and brutal. I could stay silent, allow the theft, and let my father continue his charade, hoping he wouldn't drag me down when he finally drowned. Or I could pull the thread and watch the whole tapestry unravel. If I spoke up, I would be the villain who destroyed the family. If I stayed silent, I would be the victim who financed their lies. My phone buzzed again. A text from Grant Holloway. "The papers do not care about feelings. They only care about facts. Tonight, we let the papers speak. Be ready." I went back into the room. Vivian was awake again. She looked weaker than she had 10 minutes ago. Her breathing more labored. She saw the look on my face. the conflict, the fear, the burden of the secret I now knew. "You talked to them?" she surmised. "Brielle," I said. "She told me about the debt." Vivian nodded slowly. She wasn't surprised. She had known. She had watched her son dig this hole for years. "You have a choice, Reese," she whispered. "You can protect their lie, or you can protect your truth. But remember this: you cannot save people who are determined to drown. You can only make sure you are not tied to them when they go under." I looked at the time. I had to go. I had to go home, shower, and put on the navy blue dress. I had to paint a smile on my face and walk into the lion's den. I stood up and smoothed the blanket over her legs. "I am going to the party. Grandma." "Good," she breathed. "I don't know if I can do it," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can stand there and watch them fall." Vivian reached out one last time. Her hand was cold, but her grip was surprisingly firm. She pulled my hand down to her lips and kissed my knuckles. "Don't co-opt yourself," she said fiercely, her eyes locking onto mine with a clarity that pierced right through me. "Don't you dare shrink to fit their smallness. You are not wrong. Reese, stand tall." I walked out of the hospice and into the parking lot. The wind had picked up, whipping my hair across my face. I felt like a soldier marching toward a battlefield I hadn't chosen. I drove home in silence. When I got to my apartment, I moved mechanically. I showered, scrubbing off the scent of the hospital. I put on the dress. It was simple, structured, unyielding. It felt less like clothing and more like armor. I put on the pearl earrings. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was pale, but her eyes were steady. She wasn't the girl who sat in the corner at family gatherings. She wasn't the daughter who apologized for taking up space. She was the executioner of 100 years of family secrets. I grabbed my purse and the small clutch where I had hidden the USB drive with the evidence, just in case Grant didn't make it. "Don't shrink," I said to the reflection. I turned off the lights and walked out the door, into the gathering dark, ready to burn it all down. The dinner party moved to the formal dining room, a space dominated by a mahogany table that could seat 12, but felt crowded with the weight of the lies being told around it. The Pikes were impressed. I could see it in the way Eleanor ran her finger along the rim of her crystal wine glass. My parents were performing the role of the benevolent aristocrats perfectly. They laughed at Harrison Pike's dull jokes and deferred to Landon's opinions on the stock market. I sat at the far end of the table, near the kitchen door, silent and invisible. When the main course was cleared, Douglas stood up. He tapped his spoon against his glass. The sharp ping silenced the room. "I would like to propose a toast," my father said, his voice rich with practiced emotion. He placed a hand on Brielle's shoulder. She looked radiant, though I could see the tremor in her hands where she gripped her napkin. "To my daughter, Brielle," Douglas continued, "and to the union of our two families. But mostly, I want to raise a glass to my mother. Vivian. She cannot be here tonight, but her spirit is with us. That beautiful car in the driveway is not just a vehicle. It is a symbol of her legacy. It is her way of saying that she believes in Brielle's future. She insisted, even in her final days, that we use her resources to give Brielle the start she deserves. Marilyn wiped a fake tear from her eye. She is so generous, my mother murmured. She always said family comes first. To Vivian, Harrison Pike said, raising his glass. To Vivian. The room echoed. I didn't raise my glass. I put it down on the table with a deliberate clack. The front door opened. It wasn't locked. I had made sure of that when I let the caterers in. Heavy footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor of the foyer, getting louder as they approached the dining room. Douglas frowned, looking toward the archway. I thought the staff had left. Grant Holloway walked into the room. He was wearing a dark charcoal suit that looked like it meant business, and he was carrying a thick leather briefcase. Behind him walked a woman I recognized as the head administrator of the hospice facility, wearing her ID badge and carrying a notarized folder. The silence that fell over the room was instant and absolute. "Who are you?" Harrison Pike asked, lowering his glass. "Grant Holloway," he said, his voice projecting to the back of the room without effort. "I am the personal attorney for Vivian Patterson, and this is Mrs. Gable, witnessing on behalf of the care facility." "Get out," Douglas said, his face draining of color. "This is a private function." "It is a function financed by theft," Grant said calmly. He walked to the head of the table and placed a tablet on the linen tablecloth. He tapped the screen. It was a live video feed. Vivian was there, propped up in her hospital bed, wearing her reading glasses, looking straight into the camera. She couldn't speak loudly enough to be heard over the dinner chatter, but her eyes were fixed on Douglas. "I am here acting on the direct, lucid instructions of my client," Grant announced. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. "Douglas, you just told this room that your mother insisted on buying that Range Rover for Brielle. Is that correct?" "This is not the time," Marilyn hissed, standing up. "My mother is confused. She scored a 29 out of 30 on her cognitive exam today," Grant interrupted, slapping a medical affidavit onto the table next to the roast beef. "She is not confused. Marilyn, she is furious." He turned to the Pikes. "The $84,000 used to purchase the vehicle sitting in this driveway did not come from a general family fund. It was stripped from a specific beneficiary trust belonging to Reese Patterson." Douglas Patterson used a power of attorney to access those funds. However, he failed to realize that the power of attorney document explicitly forbids self-dealing or the transfer of assets to anyone other than the account holder. Grant looked at Douglas. "You didn't receive a gift. Douglas, you committed a felony. It is called embezzlement of a vulnerable adult's assets." Eleanor Pike gasped. Landon pulled his hand away from Brielle's as if she were contagious. "That is a lie!" Brielle screamed, standing up. "Grandma wanted me to have it." "Did she?" Grant asked. He pulled out another document. "Because I have here a signed affidavit from Vivian Patterson, dated this afternoon, stating she never authorized this purchase and demands the immediate return of the funds." Douglas was shaking now, You can't do this. I am the executors. I control the estate, the house, the assets. They are under my management." "Ah, the house," Grant said. He looked around the room, making eye contact with Harrison Pike. "That brings me to the second matter. Mr. Patterson has been representing himself as the owner of this estate to secure a partnership with your firm. Has he not?" Harrison Pike narrowed his eyes. "He listed the property as collateral." "That is unfortunate," Grant said, "because Douglas Patterson does not own this house. He is a tenant at will. The deed belongs to the Vivian Patterson Revocable Trust. He has no equity to leverage. He has no authority to borrow against it. And as of this morning, due to the breach of fiduciary duty regarding the car, Vivian has initiated eviction proceedings to protect the asset from his creditors." The sound of a glass shattering broke the silence. Marilyn had dropped her wine. Red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like a wound. "Eviction," Douglas whispered. "You have been living on her charity for 30 years. Douglas," Grant said coldly, "and you repaid her by stealing from your own daughter." Harrison Pike stood up. He threw his napkin onto the table. "Landon, Eleanor, we are leaving." "Wait!" Douglas pleaded, reaching out. "Harrison, it is a misunderstanding. I can explain. The liquidity is there. It is just a structural issue. You tried to buy into my firm with stolen money and a house you don't own," Harrison said, his voice dripping with disgust. "Do not contact me again." Landon didn't even look at Brielle. He just followed his parents. Brielle stood there, the center of attention in her cream silk dress, watching her future walk out the door. She collapsed into her chair, burying her face in her hands, sobbing not for the loss of love, but for the loss of the audience. The room was empty now, except for the family and the lawyer. Douglas slumped into his chair. A man hollowed out. Marilyn was staring at the wine stain, catatonic. I stood up. My legs felt steady. My hands were not shaking. I walked to the head of the table where Grant stood. I looked at the tablet. Vivian nodded at me. "Reese," Douglas croaked. "You did this. You destroyed us." "No, Dad," I said. "You destroyed yourself. I just turned on the lights." I looked at Grant. "What are the terms?" Grant handed a paper to Douglas. "You have 48 hours to return the vehicle and refund the full $84,000 to Reese's trust account. If the money is not there by Monday morning, we file civil charges and report the elder abuse to the state prosecutor. Given the paper trail, you will go to prison." "I don't have the money," Douglas whispered. "I spent it." "Then sell your watch," I said, my voice cutting through the room. "Sell the country club membership. Sell the furniture. I don't care how you do it, but you will put back every cent you took from me." I turned to Marilyn. "And from now on, you do not speak for Grandma. You do not visit her without supervision, and you certainly do not use her name to buy social standing. If you want to see her before she dies, you ask me for permission. I am the medical proxy now. Grant has the paperwork." Marilyn looked up. her eyes filled with hate. "You ungrateful little—" "Stop," I said. It wasn't a shout, but it had the weight of an anvil. "I am the only person in this room who isn't a thief. I am the only reason you aren't in handcuffs right now. So, you will listen." I picked up the tablet with Vivian's face on it. "We are leaving," I said to Grant. I walked out of the house. I didn't look back at my sister sobbing over her ruined engagement, or my father staring at the ruins of his ego. I walked out into the cool night air, holding my grandmother's digital hand. Later that night, back at the hospice, Vivian was fading. The exertion of the confrontation had taken its toll. I sat by her bed, the adrenaline crashing into exhaustion. "Did they see?" Vivian whispered. Her eyes were closed. "They saw," I said. "The Pikes left. Douglas is terrified. He will pay it back." Vivian smiled. It was a small, fragile thing. "I didn't want to hurt them, Reese, but a bone has to be broken to be set straight." "I know," I said. "I chose you," she murmured, her voice drifting away as sleep pulled her under. "Not because you were the good one, but because you were the only one who knew how to stand straight, without standing on someone else's neck." I held her hand until her breathing steadied into the rhythm of sleep. I looked out the window at the city lights. I had my inheritance back, but more importantly, I had my name back. I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I was the one who drew the line. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below with your location and share your thoughts on how I handled my family. Did I go too far? Or did they get exactly what they deserved? If you enjoyed this story, please invite your friends to subscribe to the Morgan Revenge Stories channel. Like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this victory with even more people.